My name is Ben Stapleton. I'm the Executive Director for the U.S. Green Building Council Los Angeles. We've been very honored to partner with Hillary on this project, as well as everyone else who's contributed so much. Today's going to be a great day for a lot of reasons. This is a really important project we've been working on. This is really going to help tee up the next decade for us here downtown. And a decade is 120 months. A decade seems like a long time, but we've already worked our way through 2 of those months. We're on our way through the 3rd. We have like 157 months here in the decade of downtown to make things happen. So that just means we have a lot of work to do. And I want you to think about that a little bit today, especially as we hear from some of our great panelists. I think Hillary's done a phenomenal job of putting together a lineup to really dive deep on the mobility discussion today. I also want you to think about a few phrases. So I'm just going to throw this at you here for a moment, but meaningful mobility and the power of place in the decade of downtown. Meaningful mobility, that's really important, I think, as we move into the next decade here of what mobility is. How do we make that meaningful for people? People are thinking about transportation differently. And the power of place, that's really what downtown is all about. Downtown's been inspiring people here in LA for the I'm going to get this wrong because I don't know when this city was founded, but 150, 170, Hal probably knows exactly when the city was founded.
September 4, 1781.
See, 1781. See, more than a couple hundred years. Thank you, Hal. And why is the U.S. Green Building Council here today? The reality is that the built environment and mobility are inherently intertwined. People move between buildings. They move between the places they're going. And we have an incredible opportunity here to redefine what that experience is like. And this is also the decade of climate action. Sure, I'm the green building guy who's up here. I have to talk about that for a minute. But I want you to think about that between buildings and transportation, that's over 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And that's huge. And in fact, when you're looking at home energy use, nearly the same amount of energy is used to operate our homes as it is to move in and out of our home. And so these things are incredibly important, and they're tied together. And let's not start to think about the embodied carbon of all the parking structures we've built downtown, all the impacts of these impervious surfaces we've built that have been diverting water for years out of our water table. What we do to address transportation and how we do that in our built environment, they're incredibly important. And when it comes to LEED certification on buildings, for LEED certification, as you reduce your trip counts from 20% to 70% on a project, you move up through the LEED process from bronze to silver and gold and platinum. And overall, about 15 to 20% of your total credits come from addressing mobility and parking for your project, which is huge. Again, I want us to think about how do we move from place to place, especially how do we do that here in downtown. The wrap I've been using on downtown since I started working down here in 2007 is that it's equally inconvenient for everyone. And I did trademark that, so if you're going to use that, that comes back to me. But that's sort of the beauty and the challenge of downtown. The opportunity here is whatever we do downtown has ripple effects throughout the rest of the city. If someone experiences something here, they're going to bring that experience back to their community, whether they came here to work, they came here to play, they were meeting someone for dinner, whatever it is. If we can touch them here in downtown for a moment and change how they look at mobility, that's really the opportunity we're talking about here and the impacts that we can have around the city. So our next speaker here is Hillary Norton. I'm sure almost everyone here knows her because she probably talked to you in the last 2 weeks about being here today. But Hillary's been working to improve transportation in LA for nearly 30 years now, including as executive director for FAST, which is Fixing Angelinos Stuck in Traffic, my best and most favorite nonprofit acronym, since 2008. She's now serving as commissioner for the California Transportation Commission, which is amazing. Congrats, Hillary. Yes, that's well-deserved. And I've had the privilege of working with Hillary on the FastLink DTLA program and most recently the survey, and I feel really honored to be able to have experienced that. And yes, Hillary is a bit crazy, and that's okay. She's the good kind of crazy that gets things done. And I mean that. She's the good kind of crazy that makes things happen. And so I want to thank Hillary for all of her passion and commitment for making the city a better place to move around in. Please welcome me in welcoming Hillary Norton. Thank you.
Well, welcome to my joint roast and event. I want to make sure that we thank the people that helped make a lot of this happen. First, I want to thank Eric Triber for his great video. There's so much work involved in getting these things to happen. And again, it's just the beginning. We want you to be adding your vision to part of this, because as you see, we're going to be adding this to the website. We're going to be talking to people about what matters in transportation and how we take this decade of downtown with a phenomenal amount of growth, as our speakers just talked about, and make it work properly. How can we see it coming and anticipate what we could be doing better? And so that's what the survey is all about. And so I wanted to thank, first of all, Mark Wilbur, President and CEO of Everything HR, and his team, Bill Stevens from the DTLA Project Director, Trent Garcetti, Mark Littleton, and Veretta Yancey. Again, thank you so much. When you take our survey, the reason that we're into this so much is that you guys have seen survey after survey about why we're not doing something, right? We're doing a survey about why we are doing something. What do we care about? What's it going to take for us to move differently? What means something to us? How many people want to come and live and work in downtown LA? We are unabashedly optimistic about what DTLA is going to do and be. And you can see that there were no less than 100 different people and organizations who got excited with us and helped contribute to what the survey is going to be. It is going to be long, I got to tell you, but that's because we don't have enough good data to talk about what could go right. And so we're looking forward to having that data be something that then builds towards a wonderful crescendo of moving downtown 75% mode shift away from driving alone in the next 10 years. We know that that's achievable, and if we do, we will have made a significant international achievement, but it's possible if we do it all together. And what we love about today and every day after today in our meaningful mobility and the power of place in the decade of downtown is that we're doing it together, and if we do it intentionally, conscientiously, cooperatively, and with the optimism of supporting DTLA for what it is and what it will be, it's going to be phenomenal. And you're all a part of it. And that's why in this invitation-only event, we wanted a very close group of people who are all part of the solution to start realizing that you are a team and that we are going to be excited to work together and play together. And as I always say, every day is game day, right? So I am excited to introduce our first panel. And that first panel, if you guys could come up, Vince Bertoni, the Director of Planning for the LA City Planning Department. Stephanie Wiggins, the wonderful Chief Executive Officer of Metrolink. Doane Lyou, the Executive Director of the Department of Convention and Tourism Development. Gero, the Chief Sustainability Officer of the LA County Chief Sustainability Office. Joe Liou, President and CEO of the Coalition for Clean Air, and the newest CTC Commissioner. Woohoo! Deborah Murphy, Urban Designer and Planner for Deborah Murphy Urban Design and Planning. And Blair Besten, Executive Director of the Historic Core Bid. Also, is Julia Thayne? Oh, wonderful. Hey, hot diggity. Julia, why don't you come in and take a seat? So, we want to really take this time to set the stage for what downtown is going to be. And so I wanted to start, Vince, with you, because I think people really need to understand the metrics of what the DTLA 2040 plan could be and what the opportunity is to be able, if we do it right, to not have to use your car in order to be part of this amazing decade of downtown.
Thanks. Well, I think that what we're really fundamentally rethinking our general plan and zoning for downtown Los Angeles. And, you know, our zoning, basically the scheme of our zoning goes back to 1946 when the idea was we were abandoning downtown Los Angeles for other places like the San Fernando Valley. This really turns that on its head and thinks about LA as really the center of all of Los Angeles, and to have a general plan and zoning that supports that. So some of the things that we're doing is we're increasing our floor area ratios, or the amount that you can build on a piece of property. We're doubling those in many situations. We're getting away from where you can only have a piece of property with one type of use, so we're actually tripling the amount of downtown LA where you can do more than one thing on a piece of property, where you could do both residential and commercial and office. We're doubling the amount of area that's being allowed for housing. We're actually, if you look at the entire city, we're focusing we're basically focusing 20% of all of our future growth into 1% of our land. And we're doing that in a way that will hopefully allow for a lot more flexibility with the zoning. We're also doing something different, which is, in the past, we've always required developers to put in parking for whenever they want to build something or to change their uses. We're actually eliminating the parking requirement. So what that basically means is a developer can someone can go, you can actually put a restaurant in an old building, a new building, or whatever kind of building, and not be required to put in parking. You could build a building without requiring to put in new parking. Doesn't mean that that we won't allow you to. If you think for your business operation that you need parking, so be it, but we're not going to mandate it. The idea is that we could really have downtown be that place where you don't need to get in your car. It fits into the city's overall strategy for looking at our climate crisis, and understand that greenhouse gas emissions and automobiles are sort of the highest generators of it. And we need to do everything we can do to really support people to do things other than get into a car.
That's great. And can you just tell everybody the amazing metrics of what you hope to achieve in terms of the thousands of people who are going to be here, the thousands of housing units, and the thousands of jobs that are going to come?
I have those numbers,
yes,
actually, for you. And my numbers aren't the best, but I mean, my memory of numbers are off the top of my head. We're actually looking at where we are right now. We have 76,000 residents today. We're looking at adding another 176,000 residents in the 2040. We actually have 34,000 housing units now. We're adding another 100,000 in addition to the 34,000. In terms of the jobs, we have 219,000 jobs. We're looking at adding another 86,000 jobs. So you can see we're increasing the jobs, but we're doing a lot more to increase the housing too, so that we can provide a better balance between jobs and housing. And I should say, 80% of all the growth is we're expecting within a half mile of a rail station, so that you can really use rail. So within that half mile, we'll be doing other things to get around there.
That's amazing. I mean, you can see what this decade of downtown is really going to mean in terms of being the largest, fastest growing downtown in the nation, right, under this plan.
And I would argue that this is one of the few this is probably the most rapidly changing downtown in terms of the sense of urban place that it is. If you look at places like Chicago or New York, where those urban areas are growing in a similar way that they've grown for the last 100 or 200 years, we're really transforming the way we've really been as an area. There's very few places in America or North America where you see that happening.
That's fantastic. Stephanie, I'm so excited to have you join us. Can you talk a little bit about how you're going to be bringing through the SCORE program and increasing Metrolink service, how you're going to be bringing people from around the region, and what you're going to be doing about VMT reduction, because you bring so many people from such far distances?
Well, thank you, Hillary. I appreciate the opportunity to share our excitement about FastLink and what Vince just talked about. That's so critical for us at Metrolink. We operate a over 500-mile network, over 62 stations in 6 counties. And 62% of our riders come to Union Station. Wow. And half of them are destined for downtown LA. So we're very excited because we see downtown LA as the heartbeat for our system. Why is that important? As Hillary shared, the average trip length on our system is 36 miles one way. 85% of our riders own a car, so they're making the smart choice every day to leave it at home, stay out of congestion, and it's not even good for their personal health because you walk more when you take the train than driving, but it's good for the health of the planet. We eliminated more than 9 million car trips last year alone. Wow. Over 300 miles of VMT reduced, and we want to do more. So it's really exciting to hear about how downtown LA is going to continue to grow and be revitalized to be a major destination center. What we need, though, is we need the congestion relief. And what we are working on over the next little under 10 years, because we're all focused on the Olympics as our kind of North Star, we have a program called SCORE, which is really designed to provide more frequent rail service, safety enhancements, really attract more people out of their cars so we can, per our studies, actually exponentially reduce greenhouse gas emissions for this region. The health of Southern California can't wait. We are working on also accelerating a zero-emission future. This summer, we will have converted 40 of our locomotives to Tier 4, which is the cleanest diesel available. But we're not going to rest on those laurels. We want to be zero emission before the Olympics, so we're working on advancing that. And then we're focused on really putting the customer first. We're working on Wi-Fi. We want to make it more attractive. And what's key is our connections. What's key is our connections with Metro, because we have free transfers. We want to connect with Butterfly, any other TNCs, because we need those types of partnerships so that people can complete their trip. But I will tell you, there's a market for getting people out of their cars. If it's more dynamic, it's easy and it's seamless. And we're excited to be part of this, and we wholeheartedly support the survey effort.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for Doane, thank you. As you are bringing people in from all over the world, how does the work that you're doing to change the convention center and the areas around it intersect with what we're doing to try to change the mobility culture of downtown?
Thanks for the opportunity to share what we're working on. We're doing a small addition to the convention center. We're actually doing $1 billion expansion that's going to add about 350,000 square feet. To the convention center. It will start construction at the end of this year, hopefully, and be finished by the end of '23. I've been with the city over 20 years and work with a lot of great, talented folks. And forever, we've always thought about the 4 million residents, right? We budget, we plan, we deploy, thinking about and now in this job, I'm forced to think about 50 million visitors, right? So a lot of the times we don't think that way. We do all of our budgeting and planning and deploying based on the 4 million residents we have. So it's been fascinating the 2 years that I've been in this department. In addition to the convention center, I also am responsible for our contract with our tourism board. And so, they were the ones that really pointed out the deficiencies we had at the convention center, the things that were limiting our ability to get the large conventions. And so that's why we're expanding the convention center. We're creating contiguous space. We're connecting the West Hall and the South Hall with a new hall that will be built over Pico Boulevard. And also as important as the size of the convention and the amount of contiguous space is the amount of hotel rooms within walking distance. So this is really about mobility. And it was 2013 when Eric Garcetti took office. We had 2,500 rooms within walking distance of the convention center. Currently, we've doubled it. We're just over 5,000 rooms within walking distance. We really need to get to 10,000. We've got another 10,000 or so rooms in various stages of planning, financing, possible development. But if we could get to 10,000 rooms, it makes us competitive. But remember, San Francisco has 24,000 rooms within walking distance. Anaheim and San Diego have 15,000 rooms. Those are our competitors. So for us to just get from 5 to 10 over the next 10 years would be a great achievement. Yeah. Lastly, I'd like to say, because we're honored to have in our presence the vice chair of LA 2028 Olympic Organizing Committee, Candace Cable. That's the other, that is the other big event that's happening in Los Angeles. And so all of us, the Olympic bid was organized around sports hubs. Downtown is a sports hub. The convention center itself will be hosting 5 Olympic and 7 Paralympic games. And so a lot of the planning that we're doing is looking towards those 2028 games.
That's great. And you know, the concept of other people's money, that how can we be bringing more into the region that can contribute to sales tax? Can you give us a little bit of idea about what tourism and the visitor economy with the 550,000 people that work in the visitor economy brings in terms of sales tax and
That's
Measure
right.
M?
More than just the 1 in 8 jobs in Los Angeles that are related to leisure and hospitality. Here's a good way to think about it. A day visitor, a day trip to Los Angeles, the average spends about $60. It's 10x for a convention visitor.
Wow.
So it's almost $600. And it's 20x for an international visitor. So the efforts of the LA Tourism Board is really focused on not only the convention visitor for 10x spend here in Los Angeles, but that international visitor for 20x.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Gary, with the county's sustainability plan, can you talk a little bit about how we're creating a county and a downtown for all, and how you worked equity and the goals of really addressing disadvantaged communities and their lack of mobility and poor air quality as part of what's going on with the county sustainability plan?
Yeah, appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thanks for inviting me onto this panel. You know, first of all, I want to say that the County of Los Angeles, as an employer of 100,000 plus people, has a big presence in downtown. So we're excited just to be, as an employer downtown, to see the kinds of changes that are rolling out and have the ability as an employer to be able to provide these sorts of amenities to our own staff and our own employees. You know, and this is just an aside, but we didn't even allow people to get reimbursed for using transit for local trips. And when our office was created, that was one of the first changes we made just to simple county policy. If you take a bus, yeah, you can get reimbursed. We forced people into cars. It was crazy. It was the only way you could get reimbursed. So, but as we thought about the role of the county in crafting a sustainability plan, we really thought about the county as a region, and this goes to the heart of what the Board of Supervisors really feels our role is as a county, which is providing support and services for all 88 cities in the region, and really showing leadership and how they can bring sustainability to their own communities, because these issues are not, they don't stop at jurisdictional boundaries. They of course, are regional in scope, whether it's air pollution or congestion or whatever the issue might be. Stormwater pollution being a great example of that, following watersheds. But when we set out to craft a sustainability plan, we had to think about who we are as a county. And first and foremost, we're a human services agency. We provide the health care services, the foster care services, the public health agency for the region. So all of the health and welfare services. So we put people at the very center of our sustainability planning effort. And before we put a word on the page, we went out and held almost 200 meetings in the community, talked to people, gathered ideas, really to ground the plan and our approach in equity and in public health, which was the core of principles for us. Only then, after we gathered those 6,000 ideas, did we start to craft a plan. And transportation becomes a big piece. When you go out and talk to people, you hear all kinds of things that are important, but you always hear that transportation is important. And so we recognize that we need to shift modes, and we've put in very aggressive targets around that. We're not going to get there, quite frankly, unless downtown gets there, and to suggest that we can reduce mode shift by 75% downtown means that if we can provide that example to other communities, we can start to see those changes. And I think it's critical, you know, we put a lot on Metrolink and on Metro to try to change people's behavior, but it's really incumbent on us as local governments, because we're the ones who control the streets, the sidewalks, and all of the amenities that support that transit service. So we've got to step up and build dedicated bike lanes and build dedicated bus lanes and provide the shade shelters and comfort stations along those routes so that people are willing to get on the bus. And that's all part of our plan, and it's built in very clearly as you lay out. We even call for a transit first policy that lays all these principles out. And I'm so glad to hear about the reduction in parking. That's something that we think we should be doing in all of the unincorporated areas, saying you shouldn't have a parking minimum. You let the market decide what parking is. And we want to see decongestion pricing, right? We want to see how we can actually start to disincentivize certain behaviors and incentivize others.
That's fantastic. Joe, my colleague on the CTC, welcome. Your first actual meeting is going to be this month. Yeah, congratulations. But you bring a wealth of experience, including 12 years on the AQMD board. Tell us a little bit about what the Coalition of Clean Air's vision is for the decade of downtown, and just what we win when we do things better and clean our
We start off with this. Annual tap cards for all employees downtown.
That's right.
Right? None of our employees drives a car. They all take public transit to their job. I don't get a lot of walking in because my bus drops me off about 20 feet from my door.
Wait, tell Stephanie which bus it is.
Silver Line.
Woo! The Silver Line along the express lanes.
A little too crowded on the way home, but very nice on the way here. And it's a short walk from 7th and Fig
You can
to
thank
this
Stephanie
location.
Wiggins for her job at Metro, bringing that to fruition.
So, yeah, I mean, we try to walk the walk and ride the bus and the train. I think most of my employees actually ride the train. But I take the bus, the Silver Line. That said, I was telling you on Monday that my father was born on 1st and Figueroa in a private house on November 28, 1919. So I have some roots here in downtown. My grandparents lived in Los Angeles. My parents lived in Los Angeles. I live, in the suburbs outside of Los Angeles. My kids live in the suburbs outside of Los Angeles. So we have a pretty good feeling, I think, in my family about the problems and challenges that we've had with this. And then during my lifetime, just watching the transition, just what has happened to downtown, it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And working here for the last 9.5 years has been just fantastic. Can't keep up with all the new restaurants and all the good food, but it's been great. So that opportunity, it's really obvious what that opportunity is. But there's an opportunity in terms of air quality too. I don't know if anyone has taken a look. How many people has actually gone to the South Coast AQMD governing board, AQMD website? You been there? Anyone been to the MATES, Multiple Air Toxics Exposure Study website with the map? Nobody? Just, well, at least Gary, good for you. There's a MATES study looking at air toxics and air toxics risk. And there's basically two huge hotspots for air toxics risk. That's the ports and then downtown Los Angeles. Okay? So the only conclusion you can get from that is that air toxics follow Doane wherever he goes. No. Just kidding, Doane. No, really, if you think about it, what are our sources of air toxics here in downtown? AQMD has 405 major facilities, Title V facilities. There's one in downtown LA. It happens to be a LA County cogen plant, right across the street from where you work. Yeah, exactly. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's the one Title V facility out of the 405 in the entire 10,000 square miles of South Coast AQMD. There's only one in downtown. There's a bunch of backup diesel generators in terms of stationary sources, minor contributions to the air toxics relatively. All that air toxic risk is coming from mobile sources, cars and trucks, right? So if we can get rid of the cars and trucks, that hotspot will go away. And we will no longer be one of the highest risk level in one of the smoggiest air basins, but it's a little bit different thing, in the entire country. So we have a great opportunity here by changing the transit and changing how people get around in downtown Los Angeles to eliminate cancer risk for all of us who breathe this air every day, which is really elevated and far beyond what it should be. So the other opportunity we have, now that I'm joining you on CTC, is that with 4 more votes, she and I can do almost just about anything. So I'm looking forward to that, Hillary.
I wanted to give you one follow-up question, Joe, and you talked about that. In our survey, we talk about clean goods movement, and what are we willing to do as consumers to invest in different types of goods movement so that we can be part of the solution, not only in how we behave, but also how we get goods and services into downtown. Can you tell us a little bit about what we win if we can really get a hold of clean goods movement and reduce idling and emissions in downtown?
Well, one of the most important things that we need to do is avoid sanctions under the Clean Air Act, and they're coming. Unfortunately, we have a very important deadline coming up in 2023, and when we miss that deadline, EPA may act to impose those sanctions, and if not, I mean, quite honestly, Coalition for Clean Air and others are going to sue to make sure that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals imposes those deadlines so that we can get to clean air. But the sanctions that are associated with noncompliance with the Clean Air Act are horrible, and we don't want that to happen. And the only way that we avoid those sanctions is by cleaning up activities at the ports, and Doane did try to help with that when he was there. And then by cleaning up all the other mobile source emissions in terms of the criteria air pollutants, and that's dependent on downtown LA. It's dependent upon all of us that are driving and moving throughout the region.
That's great. Thank you. Deborah, you've spent a lifetime working on how we are going to move better, especially at the ground level, walking level. Can you tell us a little bit about what you are excited about in the decade of downtown and what you would like to make sure we think about when we incorporate the public realm with our idea of transportation?
Great, thanks, Hillary. Yeah, I've been a long time the kind of pedestrian gorilla is my nickname. And second generation.
G-U-E-R-I-L-L.
Yeah, right, exactly. And as a second generation Angelino, I have experienced downtown since I was a little kid. And my mother, shopped and worked, and my dad worked down here too. They used to meet at the Central Library when he worked night shift and whatever. But I think that's the important part of it. It's about the human side of all of this. We can talk about technology. That's really cool if we can have these apps and help us get around. That's really cool. But a person is using that app, and a person is walking to that Metrolink train and is getting to the convention center and going to those hotels, and a person is making all of these decisions. So I think we want to always get back to the human side of it, and this survey I think is going to be a key way to get people's input about how they would differently use downtown. We have to think out of the box that they've been in and how they can experience it in the future. And then remember, even today, like you said, you got off of that, off of your bus and you had to walk, even if it's only 20 feet. Everybody's a pedestrian. Right. Everybody who gets off the bus, off your bike, off the train is a pedestrian. And then key to that is to think about our seniors and our kids, because we're only going to have a great, exciting, dynamic downtown if everybody is included in that. My mother's getting older. She's soon going to be in a wheelchair. How do we make sure that she has her mobility and isn't locked away in her home? The same with kids. Do kids feel safe being in downtown Los Angeles? Like I said, I came down here as a kid, and I want to know that future generations have that opportunity and that we do it right away. Olympics are coming. People want to know that they could stay downtown and come to all these great venues that are around the convention center and Staples and everything. They want to be able to bring their kids. So I think we need to always remember the human side and the experience side of this, that it is not just some theoretical thing we're doing. We have to get very grounded and come down to earth.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Blair, you are experiencing everything that Deborah's talking about in real time, and especially with also being on the LA Streetcar Inc.'s board, with the promise of being able to have that easy access for people in wheelchairs and for strollers. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing, especially on the streets in the historic core, where there's been a lot of experimentation, and how is it like to run a bid in the midst of all of that experimentation?
Well, I'll always love to talk about the historic core, because I feel like, coming here so many years ago, I wanted to move to New York, and I wasn't willing to share a one-bedroom with 5 other girls. So I came to downtown at the perfect time when there was this collective consciousness of how do you build a city within a city. And it's a very daunting task, but it's also a very exciting one, and there was a lot of passion. You got to see the walkability of a district like the historic core just with the Art Walk alone, which started, building visitor base. You had a built-in infrastructure of low-income housing. I mean, not just in my district, but in the historic core alone, you have 17 low-income housing projects.
Wow.
So you have a built-in infrastructure of people who are elderly, disabled, you know, that have been here and aged here, and new people coming all the time and getting placed there that, you know, need to have modes of transportation that don't involve cars. You've got historic buildings without a lot of parking. You had people like Hal Bastian who, you know, basically introduced the world to this area as a place to live and enjoy for 24 hours. You had people like Said Moses that came and built bars here for people to come. So it's this constant growth. I mean, I remember the first 5 years, we were in less than 60 blocks, we were putting in about 26 retail locations per year of new retail. I mean, I would challenge any other neighborhood across the nation to have that kind of growth. So things like the streetcar, you know, you'll have cynics about that. You know, there's a million obstacles or questions about it, but it just makes sense. It's a built-in part, and we're a little behind, you know, several decades. So we got to catch up, and we got to catch up fast because there's not just the Olympics coming, but we're already seeing this tremendous growth here. So I'm more than happy to support bike lanes and more walkability and redefining how we move within the city in an easier way. Things like the streetcar, because they support small business, they support building a community.
That's wonderful. You have been right there as you've gotten Spring and Main forward, you've gotten Main Street bike lanes, you've got the scooter revolution. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that's like really on the ground level, as you say?
Well, I'm gonna be measured in my critique of it yet because it's new. It's all new. If you look at Broadway when they did the streetscape, and there are fans of it and there are people that are not fans of it. But the reality is, in the first 2 years that I worked for the bid, there were 9 accidents where cars jumped the sidewalk and crashed into buildings along Broadway on my corridor. And that's just the reality. A bus driver passed away at the location of an intersection, and I think the truck was going about 60 miles an hour down Broadway. It was early in the morning. I remember those days. I probably was guilty of doing it myself. We need to slow that down. I mean, it's, you know, we have to think of slowing traffic down, and that's so counterintuitive to people who just want to get out of downtown and go home. But the reality is we have to build a place for people to walk and to experience it outside of their cars, and so we have to make it safer for them too. Mm-hmm.
And realize that with 200,000 people living here, it is home.
Yeah,
downtown is home.
It is home. And so there are going to be growing pains. We're going to see an evolution through these streets. I think one of the things about Main and Spring is they're very unique streets. So you happen upon them and you're encountering a totally different experience from a street over. So that there's going to be some growing pains and an education there and an experience that hopefully as time goes by, people learn to accept it and appreciate all the things that it provides.
That's wonderful. Julia, you are part of the mayor's Green New Deal and really taking the technology and the investments and taking that to a new level. Can you talk about what your role is and what the new structure is of what you're doing and how that's going to help us in downtown move better?
Sure, and thanks again for inviting me. So we have a saying in City Hall that 30 is the new 50. Basically, the environmental targets that we set out for 2050 are no longer, just got to throw them in the compost because everything needs to happen this decade of climate action. So pursuant to that, just last month, the mayor signed the Green New Deal Executive Directive, which fast-forwarded a lot of what I care deeply about, and that is transportation. So it's zero-emissions buses, it's zero-emissions vehicles, it's electric vehicle charging infrastructure at scale. It is things like identifying bus priority networks, bus-only lanes, bike-only lanes. We understand that it's no longer enough to act in the long term, but we really need to set out some of these markers in the next couple of years, particularly because of the mayor's administration and the fact that he will leave and we will leave. So in that lens and through that lens, the work that I do is about how do we leverage transportation technologies and then partnerships with the private sector to start looking at these 1 to 3 year measures, and to really think about how do we do that fleet electrification, not only within our own buses, but also with ride-sharing vehicles. I'll say also, I'm somebody who lives in LA without a car. I also have an urban design background. So I view my role very much as not just thinking about the transportation technologies and how can we accelerate their deployment, but also how we can create a multimodal system that recognizes that it's as important to have very vibrant streets and sidewalks as it is to have electric vehicle charging infrastructure that you can use on those streets and sidewalks. To that end, we launched something called Urban Movement Labs, which is the Mayor's Transportation Incubator just this past November. And that is one vehicle that we're using among many tools that we have to really leverage these partnerships, these technologies, and to bring together those public aims with those private aims.
That's wonderful. Well, we're going to do a speed round because we could be talking all day, and I have to keep looking at my phone to make sure I'm not just, I could do this panel alone until 3 o'clock. So just know I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions because this has been, each time you say something, it's more and more exciting. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you. Talk a little bit about the bike cars and also how well you've been integrating people who are needing that assistance, wheelchairs, et cetera, so that this really is a mobility system for all.
Sure. Part of our vision is to really provide an integrated system. So a few years back, we dedicated a rail car in each of our train sets for bicycles. We always actively participate in Bike Day in May or Bike Week in May, but we're really proud of our growing group of bicyclists who can use our system. From an ADA perspective, it's really important. All of our rail cars are ADA compliant. We are in the process of modernizing our ticket vending machines, which are not ADA compliant, and all of them will be within the next 60 to 90 days. So we're really excited about that.
That's great. And Vince, if you could talk a little bit about the Transportation Demand Management Ordinance that you're working on with the LA DOT and how that's going to help new development in working with TMOs like FastLink DTLA, implement things differently and really integrate it with ground level development.
Right, because what we're looking at as we're transferring as the whole state of California, we've already transitioned over largely, the whole state is transitioning over in terms of how we measure traffic under the California Environmental Quality Act. I mean, the California Environmental Quality Act has done a lot of different things, but which has help us in places like, coastal preservation, our mountains and our rivers, but it's also in some ways supported suburban sprawl in terms of how it's done the analysis. So we're looking at the traffic analysis of turning that around. And so what we're looking at doing, moving from how we measure it from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. So we're measuring it from a system, changing from a system where a good thing is someone driving on a car very quickly through an intersection. We're moving that away to a system that values not getting in a car altogether. And if you do get in a car, you don't have to travel very far in that car. And so that's what we're moving into. We're in that transition, which will be completed this summer, through that. And as part of it, we're doing it in a way that makes sure that when we require things from new development, that it's really about not helping facilitate a car, it's facilitating walking, bicycling, getting on a bus, getting on a train, getting on perhaps a scooter, and things like that. And that traffic demand management system will really support all of those things. In the past, it hasn't. In the past, it's all been about improving streetlights for cars and putting in widening streets for cars and not for people.
Well, I think this just jumps right to you, Deborah, because you are a national expert in really getting other money from the state and the federal government to help really outline a new paradigm for the entire city. Can you tell us a little bit about what we all could be doing to help support implementation of those grants and really making sure that everything that you're bringing the money to do gets implemented?
Sure. Well, I think those public-private partnerships that FastLink LA has very much championed in downtown Los Angeles is something to take advantage of because there is a lot of statewide funding through the Active Transportation Program and other issues, Highway Safety Improvement Program, all of those that bring funds to help improve our streets. so that we can balance the needs of all users of our streets, and that safety is a key part of that, because as we were talking about, speed is the thing that kills. Someone hit at 45 miles an hour has an 85% chance of dying. At 25 miles an hour, an 85% chance of living. So safety is a key part of that. So that we make sure that when we go after these funds, that we design safety improvements and that we implement those improvements to the fullest extent possible, and that we take out of our mind that it's going to have maybe some impact on someone's ability to go quickly through downtown. We have to have safety first. And the only way we're going to get there is if all of us agree that when we have improvements, that we can implement them, and we don't stop the safety improvements by saying, oh no, it's more important for the driver to get through. We need to get people through, whether they're on foot, on a bike, on a bus, and maybe in extreme circumstances in a car.
That's a great point. In terms of moving more and driving less, which is a goal of ours, Julia, can you talk a little bit about the venture capital market and the opportunities for public-private partnerships to just do new things and to see downtown LA as maybe an international test bed for just early adoption of really cool new innovation?
It's a great point. I mean, when I first took this job, my boss described it as being LA's technology or transportation technology futurist and also venture capital fund. I mean, we get pitched by startups, Fortune 100s daily, multiple times a day. And it's really interesting to see what they come up with, particularly because LA, in their minds, is such a car-based town. And so they're always coming through with how do you replace the personally owned vehicle, how do you augment it? And so we're really trying to shape that investment, just how venture funds think about LA, as well as then also how we view our constituents as customers too, so that the money that comes down here and the money that's invested in startups is not only geared towards autonomous vehicles, but also towards things like e-cargo delivery bikes. So really trying to spread that out and think about it from a more holistic standpoint, embedding some of those public viewpoints and those public metrics into that venture capital funding.
Thank you. And Doane, people talk about going to travel internationally, and they talk about all the transit they take when they travel internationally. And then when you ask, well, what transit do you take here? And it's like, huh? Tell us a little bit about how the transit and projects like the 6th Street Viaduct and other things are really going to encourage more people to see LA as a destination for you to take that kind of transit and experience LA as a region totally differently as you do when you go to other cities around the world.
Yeah. What's nice about international visitors is they don't want to drive when they get here. They really don't. And even conventioneers, they have no desire to go rent a car and pay $45 to park when they reach their destination.
At least, yeah.
You know, working with planning department and Vince and the mayor's office about, you know, it's really transit-oriented hospitality is what we're looking at doing, right? We really need to build hotel. You know, I know we're talking about transit-oriented housing and development, but we really need to set aside a little piece of that for hospitality. If we can build hotels near transit stations, it's not only good for the visitors, it's great for employees, right? Those employees need to get to those jobs, and those are off-peak trips, right? So those are important considerations when we're looking at the urban planning challenges. But the game changer will be the airport, right? Once we're connected to the airport, it's going to be very easy for international visitors to get anywhere in the city, especially downtown LA, on one seat, get to their hotel. And I tell you, we provide shuttle buses for a lot of conventions. The first day they're full, but it took them 30 minutes to get 2 miles to the convention center. And it's 72 degrees and sunny, and by the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th days, they're walking. They love it.
Great.
So conventioneers love to walk. International visitors love to walk. It's even more than self-driving cars or technology. I mean, we're pretty analog. It's just a simple solution. Let's give them safe paths to walk, and they'll walk.
That's great. Blair, you've been working with the council member of this district, Jose Huizar, and as a constituent, I can say that, Councilmember Huizar has been one of the most forward-thinking people next to maybe Mike Bonin in terms of new types of transportation. What's it like to be able to start thinking about things differently with the council office, such as the Car-Free Broadway or some other programs that could really continue to transform the historic core?
Well, it's an overall vision, right? For recognizing what the district feels like and looks like and where it needs to go. And so to be able to think of it and then also to isolate it to different tributaries through different corridors and recognize the difference in those and understanding how the development's progressed. It's really exciting to have that. And again, like I said, with the streetcar in particular, the idea of forward thinking of the theaters and an entertainment district, I mean, it's all right there. And it's gonna take something like that to sort of push it over the edge. But we're already seeing it. I mean, the hotels coming, the residential. I mean, just the adaptive reuse alone, bringing so much residential so quickly. You really needed some fast thinking, and without the huge budgets to make it happen, it's kind of amazing, you know, the visual changes that have already occurred.
Wonderful. And I think, Joe, this goes back to you and the idea of traveling differently and really implementing a whole electric and near zero and zero emission future, and just walking and biking in ways that never take emissions. Can you tell us a little bit about what you would like to see in this decade of downtown that would just show that kind of transformation that the Coalition for Clean Air really seeks?
Well, it would be great if we could get the cars out of downtown Los Angeles. I think that, and then improve the bicycle infrastructure. I was talking to you the other day about what I was reading about happened in Paris. I think it's fantastic that they were able to increase bicycle ridership by 50% in a single year. I mean, it took, I don't know, 10 years of planning to get there, but in that 1 year, just by putting that infrastructure in and getting the cars out, people started riding bikes. I'd love to see that happen here in downtown. I'd love to see more people walking and fewer vehicles. And then also, you know, the delivery parts are important, right? You have to be able to get the public transit in and out, and you have to get the goods in and out, because there is a lot of consumption that happens in downtown. But that can be accommodated in creative ways, and certainly things like, you know, I mean, I know UPS has bicycle delivery services, and they're really happy, and the drivers and bicycle drivers love it. And so creative things like that would, in downtown, would really make a remarkable difference.
It's wonderful. And Gary, we're going to end with you, and that is that, you know, the county gets to see in real time the connection between health and new mobility and the costs of not doing things right. We're a county that has a perfect storm of diabetes, asthma, and obesity. Can you talk a little bit about what you envision in terms of our sustainability and what clean air and active transportation and just better mobility that doesn't require being in a car can do to help the county save money, treat people better, and just help us live happier, more thriving lives?
That's great, yeah, and it's exactly right. We are the hospital of last resort for millions of people every year. And we recognize that part of our public health challenge is the built environment and how we've designed our communities. And it's not just from an air quality perspective, although that's certainly one of the most critical areas. The notion of Vision Zero and pedestrian and bicyclist safety is critical too, and we're moving forward with our own Vision Zero program. But the first question you asked me, I think, is where I want to land on this one as well, which is really thinking about it from an equity perspective and that lens. You know, 1/4 of African American children in LA County suffer from asthma. That's far and above what Latino population faces, although they're much higher or more elevated in terms of air pollution impacts. And this is not simply a question of income. It really is race-driven, and that's race-driven from historic and legacy practices such as redlining and others. And so we need to fundamentally rethink the way we've designed our communities and put equity as our first priority.
Well, I think that is a wonderful way to end this panel. Please give everybody a hand. I want to thank you all for being part of this. And we are going to take a 5-minute break. But before we leave, I just wanted to say Ben is going to be doing our next moderating. And I wanted to introduce Ben. We were working on time. But You know, Ben Stapleton is one of those people who has a vision and executes it. When you look at the LA Clean Tech Incubator, that exists because he made it happen. And I think really taking the U.S. Green Building Council to a new direction of how we integrate not only how we operate in buildings, but how we move to and from those buildings. The U.S. Green Building Council is doing something very, very significant. So I just want to thank Ben for all your hard work and like really revolutionizing that partnership.